The Holy Quran has forbidden interest. When the promised Messiah ﷺ was repeatedly asked about how it is seemingly impossible to function in society without it, he said that no commandment is impossible, and that even if Allah had forbidden drinking water from the earth, then He would provide it from the sky. He gave the example of how business people lie when selling their products, and how workers take bribes. And they all present the same excuse that they cannot survive otherwise. If all of these excuses are combined, then Huzur said that the conclusion is that the Book of Allah should not be obeyed, because it is not possible to survive while doing so. The reality is that Allah Almighty Himself opens ways for the believers. The giving and receiving of interest is prohibited in Islam. The debate on permissibility only arises when deciding if something is actually interest or not. Now, mortgage is an example of this. Since it does not come entirely under the definition of interest, it is permitted. If mortgage was interest, it would not be allowed no matter how badly people said they needed it. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis Sayyidahullah said that here houses are sold on mortgage. In this, as the promised Messiah ﷺ said, some financial systems have become so convoluted that there is a need for a new reasoning. The Jamaat generally allows it, and previous Khulafa have been allowing that a house be purchased on mortgage. According to me, if the outgoing mortgage is about the same as rent would be, it does not matter. So, in a mortgage, the bank does not give money like student loans or business loans. It's something that's distinct. It essentially buys the house for you. Also, in a mortgage, the bank keeps a lien on the house, and they can repossess it. In this way, the interest is more like rent that a person is paying to the bank to live in the house for 30 years. The Jamaat permission for mortgage is not because there is a dire need for it. The permission is because it is a gray area and it does not come under the definition of interest. If it were considered interest, then it would not be allowed for any justification. The debate on permissibility is never on how badly someone needs interest. The degree of a person's need is irrelevant. The debate is only on whether something is technically interest or not. When determining if a transaction is interest or not, we look at the nature of the transaction itself. For example, during the time of the promised Messiah ﷺ, the Al-Badr newspaper would have subscribers pay ahead of time, but it charged more for those who promised to pay afterwards. Since there was added effort and expense in pursuing and collecting payment afterwards, the extra charge was to recoup those losses. The promised Messiah ﷺ was asked if this came under interest, and he replied that in my opinion this has nothing to do with interest. It is a right of the owner to set the price that he wants, especially since there is a loss in those who pay afterwards. If a person wants to buy the newspaper, then he can pay ahead of time as well. It is his choice. Now, another point is that if we indirectly come in contact with interest-based money, then it is not prohibited. Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu said that if a job requires advertising interest, then it is not permissible. To work as a clerk or in accounting is permissible. If a person is running a business and has to deal with and trade with interest-based money and property of others, it is not prohibited as long as the money received and given evens out. Any surplus must be given for the work of the propagation of Islam. Such a person gets involved in the interest of others, not his own personal interest. The only interest that is not prohibited in business is dealing with the interest-based money of others that is outside of a person's control, when the money a person invests is used in interest by means outside of his own choice. However, to choose to use interest ourselves is completely forbidden. For a person to choose to take an interest-based loan for business is not allowed because that is his own choice. The Quran prohibits both giving and receiving interest. Concerning the interest that we have no choice but to receive from the bank, the promised Messiah ﷺ said that we cannot spend it on ourselves or even give it in alms. It can only be spent on the propagation of Islam. The Holy Prophet ﷺ taught such care in avoiding interest that he cautioned against even subtle forms of interest. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said that if any one of you borrows something, then he gives the lender a gift or gives him a ride on his riding beast, he should not accept the gift or the ride unless they used to treat each other in that way beforehand. Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu said that if a person is dying of starvation and he can find nothing but the flesh of swine, then it is permissible for him to eat. However, interest is not permissible in any way. From this you can estimate, Huzur said, how prohibited interest is.